It's no surprise that our guest today still dreams of being the host of the Radio 1 breakfast show one day. He definitely has the gift of the gab. Right now, he's using that gift to introduce Four Pillars Gin to everyone he can. I'm Susan Schwartz, your drinking companion, and this is Lush Life Podcast. Every week, we're inspired to live life one cocktail at a time by the best in the industry. As European Trade Relations Manager for Australia's Four Pillars Gin, Joe Worthington would never think of going to any meeting empty-handed. You can taste this generosity of spirit in every drop of their gin. Maybe that's why they've just been voted the best gin in the world at the International Wine and Spirit Competition. One thing before we go on to the interview, I'm sure you've heard that this is a heartbreaking time for Australia right now, as uncontrollable wildfires are destroying everything in its path. If you are able, please donate to one of the many charities helping the firefighting and recovery effort. Now let's hear from Joe.
So originally you said I was from Leeds. That's actually not true. I am from the other side of the Pennines, which is Lancashire, because Leeds is in Yorkshire. I was born in a place called Burnley.
And wait, there's a great rivalry, isn't there, between the two?
Well, there's a great rivalry between Lancashire and Yorkshire, yeah, and it stems from, well, I think it stems from cricket, because it's the white rose versus the red rose. And I'm a bit of a cricket fan, as well as every other sport that you can imagine. So being born in Burnley, I'm a big Burnley football fan. In actual fact, they're playing Tottenham this weekend in London, so I'm looking forward to that. But I was born in Burnley, and I grew up in a place called Reed, which is about 25 minutes outside of Burnley, about 40 minutes outside of Manchester. And I grew up with my mum and my stepdad, Colin, who has been my stepfather for... I'm 30 next week, so around 26, 27 years. So he's practically my father to me. My father sadly passed away a few years ago, but I have big families on both sides and lots of grandparents. And my nan, bless her, still here. She's 96. Yeah, I know. And she only stopped playing golf like 3 years ago.
And my step-grandfather's still alive, 92.
Yeah, they're ticking along nicely, aren't they? And then I've got heaps of cousins as well, and who now have kids, and some of them have kids that have kids, and all the rest of it. So it's a big extended northern family. But I do know that somewhere on my mother's side, there's some Irish in the blood. So there's lots of kids who not using contraception and things. You know how it is Irish. It's an Irish life.
Not to generalise or anything.
Not to generalise, of course. I mean, I've got Irish blood in me. And so yeah, that was. And I've lived in I grew up in this village, and you grow up in a village atmosphere. So you play football for the local team, you play cricket for the local team, and everybody knows everybody's business. If someone has an affair, everybody knows. It's like Emmerdale. It's like a soap. But it was fun, and I made some friends for life, and I'm even going out for dinner with one of them tonight because he lives down here as well. So for me, I think my mother and stepfather, obviously my father as well, my mother and stepfather gave me one hell of an upbringing. I mean, I maybe don't tell them as much as I should. We dotted around until we settled in a place maybe when I was 12, which was Reed. And I do believe that they withdrew me from my first high school because I was suspended a couple of times.
Ooh, you're a bad boy.
I'm a bad boy, which is essentially why I've ended up where I've ended up in this industry.
Why you've ended up on my couch.
Why I've ended up on your couch.
Being interviewed, should I say.
Being interviewed in this beautiful home. But that happened. And that was just me, what I thought was being a larrikin. But obviously when you're 11 years old and you set someone's blazer on fire with a Bunsen burner, it's not all that funny, really, is it? They turn out to be quite flammable, just clothing. So I got suspended, I think. And then my mother, bless her, she decided to take me out and put me into a different school about 40 minutes drive away, which turned out to be the best school I could have gone to, really. St. Augustine's, which was pretty epic. Yeah.
Well, I like that.
Yeah, well, I grew up Roman Catholic as well. I mean, there's still obviously elements of religion in my life, but I wouldn't call myself religious.
I've never heard anyone say that a Catholic school was epic, but that's cool.
Well, I just had a great time at school.
Uh-huh.
I really just did. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was on daily report card where every teacher has to sign it for every single class ever. But I still had a great time. I had lots of friends, played sports, and it was all the way through high school. I loved it.
And were you ever thinking about what you were going to do when you grew up?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had full of these great ideas of what I want to be. And actually, to this day, I still have the same dream. My dream was always to be the Radio 1 breakfast show host, presenter on radio. Got a face for radio, you see. And that was always my dream, and it's still my dream to this day. I'm not going to give up on it just yet. But that was always my dream, to be on the radio, and being a radio show host in the breakfast time, which is bizarre considering I do most of my work now in the evenings. But yeah, I never actually knew what I wanted to do. My mother worked for a couple of big newspapers locally, and she told me that because I was very good at English language and literature, that I should pursue that and study that. And with her working in newspapers, she was always like, if you wanted to become a journalist or anything of those sorts, we'd look favourably on an English degree rather than a journalism degree. Okay. So naturally, I just fell into that and studied that at A level, which I did, and I got a great result in that, and then went on to study that at university. First Manchester, and then hated it there. Went to Leeds, and then yeah. And then I guess the funny story is that I went to 3 universities in 3 years and dropped out of every single one.
Not because you were bad and lighting things on fire, I hope.
No, not anymore. I only did that when I was 11.
Right.
I just dropped out of every single. It just wasn't for me. My I would never say that I've got any sort of ADHD, but I can't pay attention for something for so long that if it's not interesting.
But you did so well on your A levels. You would think that would translate into.
Oh, you'd think. You'd
yes.
think, but it did. But it turns out it didn't. When you get to organise your own schedule, turns out it's not. You can choose to go out at night and then not get up and miss a lecture, and you won't get in all that much trouble.
The Fairy Queen, or drinking all night.
Yeah, it was that down the rabbit hole I went. And I ended up
Chaucer or drinking whiskey.
That's exactly right. You know, which one do you want to do? Do you want to go out and drink some Midori sours, or do you want to? I'm sorry to Branco, I just did a Branco there. Do I want to go out drinking all night, or do I want to wake up to the 12th Night, William Shakespeare, and learn all about Sir Toby Belch?
So was that your first? Did you ever think alcohol? Like, oh, I've got, I'm going to drink in these bars, and then I'm going to get behind the bar.
Do you know what? It was actually I worked for a company in Leeds for a couple of years, and I always worked part time whilst I was studying or playing football or rugby or whatever. And they offered me over. There was one summer. I got offered a job working in a really good restaurant in La Manga in Spain. Yeah, working with basically one of my friends that I grew up with. He worked there the previous summer, and he suggested it to me, and I got in touch with this guy called Wayne, who has turned out to be a great mentor. But he said, yeah, come across for the summer. So I went across for the entire summer and basically bartended in a place in La Manga. But whilst I was there, I got an offer from the company I was working for back in Leeds saying, we'd love for you to come on board as a full-time bar manager. Now, at the age of 19 years old, or 20 it might have been, I can't remember, getting offered £17,000 a year feels like you've won the lottery. I'm going to be earning more than £1,000 a month. I can't wait. Let me just see if I can, give 60 hours of my week to doing that. And of course, I said yes. And then I dropped out of university. And I remember my mum and Danielle, who's my eldest sister. She was like, they were not happy.
Oh, I'm sure
they were not happy. Why waste this beautiful brain you've been getting? I'm kidding. That didn't say that. I'm just saying that about myself. But say why waste if you got any sort of gift? Why waste it by not going to university and not getting a degree or an education? And my sister was like, "You're going to regret it forever." And it was actually my stepdad who said, "You know what? This is the first thing he's ever stuck at for any sort of grace or grace period, and he was just like, you know what, maybe just give him a shot and let him just do what he wants to, let him make his own decisions. And I'm still 20 at this point, so if it turns out to be the wrong decision, you've got time to correct it.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously at the time I didn't listen to that. I just listened to, yes, go and do what you want to do. But now looking back, I'm now 10 years on, I'm like, okay, well that was a huge part of my career. Now someone in my family saying, you know what, go and do what you got to do and go and enjoy yourself. So that's exactly what I went and did. And I went and worked for that company for maybe another year, and then I got fired.
Wait. Now, while you were working at the company, before you were fired, what were the things that you were doing? And did you love them?
Do you know what? It was, I was working in a place called Trio, and it was this 3 or 4 story venue that there was a basement rock and roll bar. And then on the middle floor, it was a restaurant that was open all day for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And then the top floor was Skippy's Bar, which was like a sort of more refined cocktail lounge that did smaller dishes. And I was the bar manager, so essentially it was just day-to-day running of the liquor interest. Mm-hmm. But we had a great team, and that's what I loved about it. It was a family, and every single day you're working with people that you love, and still to this day I'm in touch with. You know, so that was what was for me. I remember people saying to me, "Oh, if you go for a career in hospitality, you'll never have a social life." But my career in hospitality was my social life, and that's why I absolutely adored it. Mm-hmm. It was great. It was a lot of fun. But I was young, and you can go for nights on end without sleep, and you can say Tom Cruise in Cocktail was your idol. You're allowed to do that. But it changes as you, and I'm not saying I'm mature because I'm far from it, but as you mature, you understand more about what it is that hospitality gives you, which for me, it's given me a grounding on being able to speak to everyone. Did
you know then this is the business I want to be in?
I knew that I wanted to be in the business of people. Mm-hmm. That's what I knew I wanted to be in. I knew that speaking to different people every single day, whether or not it's serving the same product, and I don't know whether that means across retail or across food and beverage, I really don't know. But I just knew that I wanted to work with people, and it was great working in a family, but also it was great just meeting, and it's such a cliche, because people say it all the time, you know, the one thing I love about hospitality is that no 2 days is the same, but no 2 customers are the same. Mm. I mean, you can get regulars, which again is great, but being in hospitality is being in one long conversation, and that's something that someone who likes to talk. That's something that I didn't want to give up, and that's basically the reason why I'm still.
You're still talking.
I'm still talking. I'm still in booze. That is exactly the reason. Now, you said you were fired. I was fired.
Hopefully for not setting anything on fire.
No,
that's going to be the theme now.
Do you know what? Like it was. I think it was the right time. The bar needed some freshening up, and it needed some fresh ideas. But I was in the wrong. I tried to manipulate some stock to make us look like we were doing better than we were. We were up lots of Guinness and down lots of vodka, so every time someone ordered a Guinness I'd put through a vodka, that sort of thing. But it questioned my integrity, but it also but getting fired also gave me a real kick up the arse. Mm-hmm. It shows that you can't just mess around with somebody's business like that, and it's not fair to them and or to myself in the long run, because if I'd have got away with that I'd have thought that was fine forever.
Right, of course.
Yeah. So
did you ever think about going back to university?
I did, and I still do to this day.
No, I meant at that point.
I'm saying at that point, okay. I did think about that. I did think about it, yeah, but not for a fleeting instant, I do believe.
And so where did you go from there?
I actually applied. I saw an ad on something called caterer.com. I was just trolling that day in, day out, looking for jobs in Leeds or Manchester, seeing where I could go. And I saw an ad for a cruise ship, and so I applied for it. And this cruise ship was called the Pacific Pearl. And I remember I had 6 interviews for it, 4 on Skype and then 2 in person. And I ended up getting the role. And
what was the role?
The role was head bartender for 16 bars on the cruise ship.
Oh.
which was, cause having been a bar manager of a high volume bar and restaurant in the student capital that is Leeds. They obviously thought I was a good fit, and they want to make sure the right personality as well, which is why all the interviews were in place. And it was funny, I didn't have two pennies to rub together, and I remember getting all my flight details, and they were flying me via Hong Kong.
Oh, where was it? You didn't say where. It was Pacific
It was the
Pearl.
Pacific Pearl, so it was sailing all on the Pacific. So it was Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, New Caledonia, French Isle of Pines, and which is like French Polynesia.
For how long?
So it was 6 months contracts. So you go and you work every single day. But before I landed there, they wanted to fly me via Hong Kong. So I got all my flight details and everything. Very quickly when I was in the air, I realised that the second flight was booked literally half an hour after I landed. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to make that flight.
Even if you run, right?
So I was in Hong Kong and I missed the flight. And I couldn't get in touch with anyone from the cruise ship, the head office, because it was at night. And I hadn't really met anyone from Carnival who owned P&O.
Okay.
I hadn't met anyone, and I had maybe £15 in my bank account. Yeah, so obviously I had to ring Mum at the first hurdle. I ring Mum and said, "Mum, I need some money." So I remember my mum sent me maybe £100-200, and I got a hotel. And by the time I got that, then someone had rebooked me a flight in the morning, and it was all fine. But obviously, I arrived 14 hours late.
Did you miss the boat?
No, I didn't miss the boat. Did I miss the boat? I didn't miss the boat, thank God. But what I was meant to happen, I was meant to get there in the evening and then sort of settle in. You know, have a night on the boat, meet some people, meet the teams, because there's 120 bar staff. Meet the teams. And then the morning we were going to do sail away from Sydney. However, I got there 1 hour before sail away, and they were very much like, you got to get on, you got to go and change, get your uniform, blah blah, and then you start work. And I was like, okay, deep end, you know what? This is kind of the way I like it, right? Even at 20, 21 years old, I was just like, this is kind of the way I like it. I'm going to just go ahead first. So then I get my induction was like later that afternoon, but at first they were like, you're just going to go straight in the bar, you need to learn all these cocktails, blah blah blah. But then we move away and we sail over. I can't remember the sea now. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a 3-day voyage from Sydney to Auckland. But the sea is super rough. It's choppy sea, as they call it. And I had never been on a cruise ship before, so I did not realise that I was going to get seasick, did I? And when I say I got seasick, I didn't just get seasick. I was violently ill. I projectile in. That is the closest, and this is a bit dark. That is the closest I've been to wanting to die ever. It is the worst feeling I have ever had. And they sent me down to the infirmary, and they could see I was white. Oh, actually, no, I've got a better story. They sent me to induction first. Okay, induction was at the top of the ship, level 15. In the boardroom, right? That's the worst part of the ship, because that's the biggest movement.
Oh boy.
Rise and falling. Oh my God. And there was a girl on there, and she was sat opposite me, and later she told me that she just kept looking at me thinking, he is green, he is not going to last on this ship. And I had to leave the induction halfway through. And they sent me down to the infirmary, and they put me face down on a table, pulled my trousers down, and injected me in my bum.
Dramamine.
And they were like, go straight to your cabin now, which I'd not been to yet, and hadn't met my cabin mate yet. They were like, go straight to your cabin and go, this is going to knock you out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I was out for maybe 14, 15 hours. I know, right? And I woke up and it would have been midnight maybe. I woke up. And I woke up and I was like, I need food. I need to eat something. So I left my cabin, and thankfully where I was, which was the 5th floor, it was on the other side of the staff canteen and the crew bar. And I heard lots of noise and music, so I naturally went down there, and I was in shorts and t-shirt and no shoes. And I quickly got introduced to everyone straight away after a few beers, and I had a couple of beers myself. The funny thing is that girl who said that guy looks green, she was called Stephanie. I ended up being with her for 8 years. So we were together for 8 years.
So you got your sea legs.
I found my sea legs,
yes.
and I loved it. You work every single day, 10 hours a day. Might be split shifts. It might be 6 a.m. till 10 a.m. or it might be 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. But you work 10 hours a day, but it might be split shifts, so it might not be all the way through. But it was a baptism of fire. But it was one of the best things I've ever done. Yeah.
And were you starting to then develop your bartending skills? You're making of classic cocktails. Like, what kind of drinks things were you learning then?
Do you know what? And it's the biggest thing I learned on that cruise ship I will get to the drinks things. But the biggest thing I learned there, after growing up in the north of England, but the biggest thing I learned there was culture and people, because 90% of all the bar staff were either Filipino or Indian. And I'd never been in an environment like that before. The biggest thing I can attribute to that cruise ship was working with those people. I learned that people from these cultures have the most beautiful culture in the world. Holding hands before a Chinese dinner in Fiji was probably a real eye opener for people to say a prayer to their own Hindi god. Was a real eye opener for a young lad. And these guys are people that have worked on cruise ships for years and 30, 40 years old, and I got put in there as a 21-year-old as their boss. So I learned more about people than I learned about anything else. Cocktails, I'd say I learned more in Leeds. These cocktails on the cruise ship were woo-woos, June bugs, cosmopolitans. They were easy to pump out cocktails that were prepped in batches, They were very easy cocktails, but there was a couple of bars on there, like I can't remember the names now, but where the sort of expensive booze were, and that's where you can make a proper drink. And most nights I was placed there because that's where they were the most expensive drinks, and people with the most knowledge and stuff were placed on that bar.
And how long were you on the cruise line for?
It was 7 months, I think. 7 months I was on it.
Did you ever think of renewing that contract and doing it again?
I did think of renewing the contract, but I chose not to. There was various reasons behind that. One was obviously a girl; she didn't want to go back on either, and so we moved to London, and I went to work for a company called Coney and Barrow, who are widely known now as wine merchants. But they used to have 24 bars throughout the city, the square mile of London. So I went to work for them at the age of 21 or 22. And I was only there for 6 months before deciding to go to Australia.
Now, was Stephanie from London, or
Steph's from Kent?
Okay, so she was English.
Yes.
Should I say?
Yes.
So you decided to up sticks and
we decided to move to London.
But I mean to go to Australia.
Yeah, before that, I should mention that we travelled 27 states in America. We did a road trip with the money that we made on the cruise ship. We did a bit of a road trip, and I will always be massively grateful to Steph for allowing me to do that. We're no longer together, by the way, so we don't have to dwell on Steph too much.
That's it. We've left her in London. You're now off to Australia.
Yeah, if she ever listens to this, I'm sorry, Steph. I'm just going to leave you behind for now. So yeah, I went to Australia. I went to Australia.
I hear you.
Two of my close friends, again, it seems to be coming back to this guy, but Jordan is called. I'm going for dinner with him tonight. He was the one I went to Australia with. Many moons ago, 2012, I think it was.
Well, why Australia?
Honestly, it's one of those things. I think we'd seen a couple of people do it, but it's like, how far can I get away from where I grew up? I don't know if that was the reason being, but also there's probably some naivety in there, which is like an English-speaking country. It's hot, there's heaps and heaps and heaps of beaches. Heaps, say the Australian coming out. There's heaps of beaches. Apparently, there's a great food and drink scene. Kind of just was like, let's just do it. And there was an offer, I think, on some flights with Thai Airways or Turkish Airlines, and we just bit the bullet and went. And we went to Melbourne and stayed in St Kilda, and I hated it. I'd messed up with my relationship, and I was arguing with my friends because we met two of our friends out there. I was arguing with everybody. I was angry. I was working in a bar for cash, and it was just sorry, rubbish. It was rubbish. And that was it really. And then very quickly I decided that I'm going to go off on my own. I'm going to go to Sydney, and I'm just going to go on my own. And what I learned about myself is that I am so social. I love to be in social situations, but I need my alone time. I need to be able to decompress and find my centre again. And it was one of the best things I've ever done, going to Sydney. And I was in Sydney for 3.5, 4 years. Did
you know what you were going to do there, or you just went and then
I knew that I was
pounded the pavement?
I knew that I was going to work in a bar. I knew that I was going to crash on a mate's sofa for a while. I knew that's what I knew that. I knew that's what I was going to do. I other than that, I had no plan. I maybe had $2,000 in my bank, my Aussie bank, and that was it. I knew that I would have to find a job within probably 3 or 4 weeks if I wanted to actually survive. I remember ringing my parents and my grandparents for some money, and I got told no. You chose to go to the other side of the world. You look after yourself, and I despised them for it. And I made a point of saying to myself, that's the last time I ever asked them for money, which I upheld until recently, but that's a different story. So I decided. I just thought that at that point, I think that was my first sort of like realization that I'm now, you're meant to be an adult now, act like it. And then I got a job in a restaurant bar called Bondi Hardware, obviously in Bondi, just off the beach, working for two guys called Ben and Hamish, who again are two. They're two of the. I've had probably 4 or 5 mentors, and those two are as close to the top as possibly you could be. I went to work for Ben and Hamish, and I was interviewed by their group's bars manager called Lockie, and he interviewed me. I turned up in a jacket. I don't know why I did that. I wore a blazer to a bar interview, but I thought I'd try and make an impression, and I got the job.
Wearing the jacket, you made an impression.
I made an impression. Right. Now, the wonderful thing about that is that Lockie gets married on the 10th of the 10th next year, and I'm one of his groomsmen. Mm-hmm. So the reason I adore Sydney so much, obviously the city to surf in proximity is absolutely fantastic, but the reason I love Sydney so much is because of the people. Lockie, Ben and Hamish, I also had friends, Dan and Sean there as well. They made that experience mind-blowing, really, to the point that Ben and Hamish then sponsored me. They paid good money, good strong Aussie dollars to keep me in the country, because as an expat you can only do 6 months at a time if you're on a working holiday. But they instead they went through immigration and they sponsored me and paid all that money to keep me on.
So what were you doing for them?
Initially I started just as a bartender. I was bartending, but obviously the pay in Australia is $25 an hour. Mm-hmm. Suddenly you work 60 hours a week and you feel rich. Mm-hmm. I then progressed to bar manager, and as soon as I got sponsored, they have to pay you a minimum salary, I think, of like $55,000. And then they opened a new venue called SoCal, which is a Southern Californian sort of taco joint. But it was a rooftop. It had this outside area, and it was just a gorgeous venue. And I ended up working my way all the way through up to general manager and staying there for a couple of years. And then they opened another venue in the city, and I went to open that as general manager. And it was just a very fun time. And then I got the news that my dad had been taken ill. He got cancer. and then the decision was made for me to move back home. Really, so I moved back to the UK, and so I could, and then I wanted a job where I could have weekends free to obviously spend time with my old man, but obviously I also knew that I needed to work. I had to work because you just can't survive. No. So I went to work for a Scottish brewery called Brewdog, which you'll know now probably. Which, you know what, has some great beers, but I did not have a good time there. It's a little bit.
You weren't up in Aberdeen, were you?
No, I did have to go there once. Like, it felt like once a week. It was like I had to fly to Aberdeen, then get a taxi to Ellen, right out.
Yeah.
And whilst, look, they're a great company. I'm not going to badmouth them at all. There's a little bit of brainwashing going on. We're the best. Peroni and Budweiser are rubbish and all the rest of it. So in my eyes, I went full circle, and I was like, I was a craft beer fiend. I was a craft beer fiend for a while. But in the end, after 3 months, I was like, this really isn't for me. I am not interested in what's trying to be forced down my throat. I wish them all the success,
of course.
Which they clearly have done.
Back to Australia for a second, because we're kind of here to talk about Four Pillars. Jim.
Yes, we are.
When did you start hearing about them? Because they've only been around for about 5 years.
So 6 years. 6 years this month,
6 years,
actually. December the 4th, I do believe. And actually, I was working for Applejack, so the company that Ben and Hamish owned. We stocked the Rare Dry Gin, which is the Four Pillars Hero. It's the baby. It's the first one, which is a real classic clean, citrus-driven gin. That is it just makes a wonderful gin and tonic and martini. So we started stocking that gin. And then I remember Stu and his team from Liquid Ideas, which is also his PR company. They came into SoCal, and he gave me a bottle and asked me if I wouldn't mind making some Negronis with it. And I was like, sure, I'll do that. And then we just had a great laugh. I met Stu for the first time then. That would have been maybe a year into its inception, so 2014.
But you started stocking it before you had met them.
I don't think we'd stocked it before I'd met Stu, no, because we didn't have a bottle behind the bar.
All right.
So he gave me personally a bottle, which goes back to this, which I'll get onto the how generous we are as a brand after. But he gave me personally a bottle, and he gave the bar a bottle, and asked us if we wouldn't mind making some Negronis, but charging us full price. Okay. Charging them full price. Okay. Which again is just a little thing, but it goes a million miles especially when you're a brand new venue. And ever since then, Applejack and Four Pillars had a great relationship. We started putting them in cocktails on the list. We were supporting local. Before Four Pillars, maybe there was one other gin brand, and that was it really, of any note. I won't say the name.
We're only here to talk about Four Pillars.
We're only here to talk about Four Pillars. And I think now there's like over 100 brands. So it shows how far it's come. But before that, it was the big five. It was Gordon's, Bombay. It was Beefeater, Tanqueray, Hendrix. And now where Four Pillars is, it's the second best-selling premium gin behind Hendrix only. And it's doing very, very well.
So I guess you were blown away by it after having sipping the Negronis.
Do you know what? It was just a great gin, and for them to call it Rare Dry Gin, and then you automatically ask the question, why is it rare? And you learn that they put in these botanicals like lemon myrtle and Tasmanian mountain pepperberry leaf that are obviously native to Australia. And it was the brand story as well, how they're dedicated to modern Australia and the craft of bartenders, and they wanted it struck a chord, and we wanted to support local. So after that, we started putting them in all on our specials boards, in our menus, and then we started holding in-house competitions across all the venues where Stu would come down and judge and make a big song and dance, and very quickly we cultivated a relationship like that. Yes, that's how we met, and then so 5 years ago.
So then you came back to work in a different alcohol, which you no longer liked.
Yes, and then I got a job working for another gin brand, which you may or may not know, called Portobello Road, and they were opening their distillery over in Notting Hill, and I was asked if I interviewed for the position of general manager to open that venue, and it's a glorious venue. So I took that job. And that again is I put that in my top 3 learning curves of all time as well, because that was a venue of 4 floors. The Gin Institute, which is where you blend your own gin. That was the shop. It was a bar, it was a restaurant, and it had 3 hotel rooms as well.
Right.
So that was a
biggie.
It was a big job. Yeah, big job. 60 odd staff. I didn't last. I lasted quite a long time. I've always worked, apart from Brewdog, I've always worked for companies for quite some time. So I was against leaving. However, a man called Donald Stewart Gregor III from Four Pillars had come over to the UK and asked me to go out for dinner. And he was like, I am interviewing these 18 people tomorrow. Do you know any of them? And I knew a couple of names, that's it. And so we went out for dinner, we had a good chat, and I was like, good luck in finding the person. We never even mentioned me working for them. And then the next day he called me and he was like, where are you? And I was like, I've actually just finished work. It was about 6, 7 p.m. I'd been there all day. And he was like, oh, I'm here. Do you want to come out for a drink? And I was like, all right, you're only in London for a few days. I'll come and meet you. We've had a good relationship for a few years. And he was like, mate, they're all rubbish. And I was like, I'm sorry about it. He was like, why don't you just take the job? And I was just like, I can't, Stu. I can't take the job. I was like, it's not right for me to leave the job. I've just come in 8 months. I've been at Portobello trying to set up this distillery. It's not right. And he said, okay, no worries. And then he called me a couple of weeks later and he was like, do you want the job or not? And I was like, no, I don't want the job. And then he basically said I could. He basically just said, how do we make this work? That's what he said to me. Not write my own ticket, but he said, how do you make this work? And I just said, look, let's be honest. I was like, I need something. It's so far away from Australia that, number one, please match my salary, all the rest of it. And I was like, number two, I need a phone, laptop, travel, that sort of stuff. And she was like, do me a favour, send me your CV, let me talk to Cam and Matt, who are obviously the co-founders. And then he called me back a couple of days later and was like, if you want the job, it's yours with, this is the offer. Yeah. And I said yes. And I took the job.
So how long ago is that now?
That'll be 3 years in a couple of months. Mm-hmm. I think, yeah.
Now, at that time, did people in the UK know Four Pillars, really?
No, so it was being distributed by Liberty Wines that are a great distributor, but they're essentially more wine focused. But because we're based in the Yarra Valley, which is wine country, I think that there was some connections there, and some Australian wine had been distributed by them. So Cam and Stu had been working in wine for years and years prior to this, so there was a connection there. But Liberty Wines, I think, had more wine contacts and wine accounts. So I think initial sales were a bit slow. So I will say that not a lot of people did know about Four Pillars at the time of me being hired. However, I knew about them, and I knew how well they're doing in Australia, and I knew how good the gin was. And by this point, the bottle that you've got right in front of you, the Bloody Shiraz, was also very prominent and becoming quite the desired juice, really. So I knew there was a big job. We were changing distributors to Love Drinks that are based in Clapham, and we set about essentially launching it to the UK market. And it was brand education, brand advocacy, brand building. It was everything from tastings, whether it was 2 people or 200 people. It was conversations, whether it be with an independent liquor store down the road or Selfridges. It was every little conversation you can imagine about introducing a new gin to the market. And I believe that we got there just in time because of the gin boom. Mm-hmm. We'd still love to sell more gin, obviously, today, but we got there just in time. And it's gone well. It's gone well, and it seems to have a really cool. reputation. I'm not sure how, because it's been, I'm the representation, and I'm not super cool, although I'm a little bit cool.
You're a lot cool.
Oh, thanks very much. And so yeah, it's got a cool reputation. We're doing very well with trade. We're starting to build this real sort of familiarity within consumers as well. We now need that big retailer on board, and we will start to really press on.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think you have this cool reputation?
Do you know what? I think we have this internal motto, which is we take our gin seriously, but not ourselves. I like to have fun. I like to work hard. I like to play hard as well. We're also very generous. We should. Stu always told me, never go to a meeting empty-handed. Never go anywhere empty-handed. If you're going to go to a bar, a restaurant, a hotel, a meeting, never go empty-handed. Give them something to take away. They not only will take away whatever you've talked about, but they're going to take something else away that's going to remind them of that conversation later on. And Four Pillars have always beat it into me we're a generous brand. So I don't feel like maybe we've bought people's affections by leaving gin here, there, and everywhere, but it's certainly stood us in good stead. We've thrown some great parties. We like to get a little bit wild on occasion, especially when Stu and Cam and Matt come over. The big personalities that we throw dinners, you'll know you've been at one of our dinners. We parade around on bars and tabletops, and I just feel like there was quite a number of gin brands that were doing great, but they were probably being a bit too educational. We forget that. I think some people forgot in regards to gin that it's still alcohol. People drink alcohol to, either let loose because they've had a good day or because they've had a bad day or just because they're socialising with friends. But the connotations around drinking alcohol is that you're meant to be enjoying yourself or just letting your hair down. And I feel like people were being too educational. They were ramming, how much the percentage of juniper you need to have in a gin and what unicorn tears that they've developed from a dolphin. And I feel like people just forgot to have fun. And I believe that we brought it back a little bit. We always like to talk about our gins and how we make them and what we do with them and the botanicals that go in, but we don't dwell on that. We make them drinks with it, and then what you're meant to do with a drink is drink it and not sit on it for hours. And that's basically it. So the reputation that we have has been garnered by having fun with it, mm-hmm. and not taking it too seriously, not taking myself too seriously. And that's basically it.
But saying that, we are going to dwell on the gin a little bit for right now. Now, you did talk about the London Rare. You did talk about the Rare, not the Rare.
But you are right.
Oh, no, the London Rare.
No, it's called a Rare Dry Gin.
Rare Dry Gin.
But it is a London Dry style, because the London Dry is a style of gin. But we just thought, we're based in Australia. Why are we gonna call it Four Pillars London Dry Gin from Victoria?
See, I've been living in London too long. Called it London Rare Dry.
But obviously, London Dry comes from here, and it dates back to obviously William of Orange bringing it to London, but we really just wanted to focus on it. Yes, it's a London Dry. We didn't want to call it a London Dry because we're from Australia, but the fact that there were some botanicals in the Rare Dry that had never been used in the production of gin before, so that was why we called it Rare, because it was rare. That was at that time. Now, you'll see a lot of Australian distilleries using those botanicals, but, what is it? Flattery is the biggest... what's it called? Imitation is the biggest form of flattery. So I almost got it right. Did I study English at university? Yes, I did, but I didn't get a degree. So that's exactly what we did. And we called it Rare Dry Gin, and that still is our baby. It's still takes up 60 or 70% of Cam's time, I do believe, making that. Beth, our beautiful Christian Cole 2,000 litre still, pumps out, 2 or 3 times a week.
And you've garnered lots of awards
with
it as well.
We have a plethora of awards. Most recently, the International Wine and Spirits Competition win, which was last Thursday. We won a Gin Producer of the Year, which effectively for 2019 makes us the best gin in the world. for 2019.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Cam flew in a Thursday morning and flew out Saturday morning.
But you also make some other things, as you said, the bloody Shiraz.
Yeah.
And where did that come from?
That was, I do believe, a happy accident. Cameron McKenzie, founder and distiller, I believe he was asked to look after some Shiraz grapes, so keep them in a cool store, like in our distillery. And I'm pretty certain Cam said to his mate, he was like, look, if you don't come and get these grapes soon, I'm just going to play around with them. And I'm not necessarily sure if these were Shiraz grapes. They may have been Merlot or Cabernet Sauvignon, because I know that we tried this gin in different ways before we finally found a process. But essentially, we just poured high proof 90% gin over these grapes and then put it through a wine press, squeeze the hell out of it. Cam was tasting it every single day and was genuinely like, well, we're onto a winner, I think. And so I believe over the next however many months, he perfected this recipe and decided on Shiraz because, well, not only is it one of the national grapes of Australia, it's very, particularly Barossa and etc. They're very well known for their Shiraz. It became our riff on a slow gin. Slow berries, if they do grow in Australia, they don't grow, there's not a huge amount to cultivate, but being based in the Yarra Valley, we are surrounded by rolling hills of vineyards. And this gin, I remember a story Cam actually told me last week. At first, the wineries that we were buying the grapes from didn't want anyone to know where we bought the grapes. They were like, do not tell anyone, we don't want to be seen to be helping out the gin business, blah, blah. And now, guess what? Now they all want their name on the bottle. Right? But I believe now, if you just look on there, it says, just underneath gin, it says Victorian grapes, right?
Victorian Shiraz grapes.
There you go. So it used to be Yarra Valley Shiraz grapes, but so this year we'll crush 200 tons of Shiraz grapes, and it now makes us the biggest crusher of Shiraz grapes in the region, which is bizarre because we're a gin company. So we're actually crushing more Shiraz grapes than wineries that make Shiraz wine.
It's very popular.
It's very, very popular, and it's quickly become our number one seller in the UK. It's not in Australia, but here in the UK, where people are going wild for any sort of colour of gin and fruit-forward gins, and it really is. It's an outstanding gin, and serve it with lemon tonic, where the lemon just cuts through the natural sweetness and gives it a lift. It's absolutely delicious. It's all my close friends absolutely love it and can't get enough.
Are you playing around with any other things that you can tell us?
So yeah, of course. I mean, we've got in our core range, we have the Bloody Shiraz, the Rare Dry, but we also have the Spiced Negroni gin, which was a gin that was made with a bartender called Jason Williams back in Australia, and it was designed for a Negroni, sort of to work alongside the Campari. And because obviously Campari is that big sort of a bitter agent, and we wanted a gin that sort of elbowed it out the way, but also worked harmoniously with it, if you can. And that was using a few more sort of mystical botanicals, like, we've got grains of paradise in there, which is a West African spice from Ghana, which has notes of clove and session. We've got fresh ginger, we've got blood orange in there. We've got cubeb, which is an Indonesian Javan pepper. It's this big, punchy, rough and ready gin, and we actually call that the ugly bitch to the Rare Dry, because the Rare Dry is this very clean, crisp, premium gin, and yet the Spiced Negroni is this punchy, but real sort of gin drinker's drink. However, the reason that's now in our core range is because not only is it wonderful to mix with, but we realise when you add tonic to it, it's this wonderful spiced gin and tonic, and that's why, and it became very, very popular very, very quickly. And then we also have our wonderful Navy Strength, which I think has won more awards than any other Navy Strength in the world. So I think I can officially say on this to you right now that it's the best Navy Strength in the world, tongue in cheek, but that is delicious as well. However, what being this time of year, which this time of year is Christmas, we do also make a Christmas gin, which is a blend of 2 different gins. And in one of the gins, we actually, in the botanical basket, in the Carter head, we actually suspend Christmas puddings that are made by Cam and his daughters because they found one of Cam's and mother's old recipes from Women's Weekly, I think. And so every year, all the kids get together, Stu, Cam and Matt's kids get together and make these wonderful Christmas puddings. We then suspend them in the botanical basket. The vapour passes through. So it lends all these Christmas pudding lends its flavour to the gin, but not only that, we then take those Christmas puddings, package them up, and then sell them as well.
I know, that's what I was going to say. Oh my God, that Christmas pudding must be so delicious.
It is. I've only got one at home, so I was going to bring that today, but I really want to try it myself because I haven't
coming
tried
over
it.
for a bite.
Oh, you can come over. I think we're doing London Christmas on the 19th.
All right. Now, I want to try some of this bloody gin.
Absolutely.
Should we go try a drink?
Let's absolutely try a drink. Crack it open. That's what it's there for.
Thanks so much to Joe for sharing his story. He had brought me a bottle of the bloody Shiraz gin, which we cracked open and mixed with lemon tonic. Delish. Then he actually set to making me the cocktail of the week. Have you seen Tom Collins? If you were asked that in 1874 and answered that you did not know that Tom Collins about whom you were being asked, you would be told that he was spreading lies about you and could be found just around the corner in that local bar. Of course, then you would rush off to find that Tom Collins to shut him up. This 19th century silliness began happening so often that it was actually called the Tom Collins hoax and memorialized in several songs. The first recipe of the Tom Collins made it into the 1876 edition of Jerry Thomas's Bartender's Guide, made with sugar, lemon, gin, soda, and ice. Our cocktail of the week is Who Shot Tom Collins, made with 2 of 4 Pillars gins. All you do is mix 30 mLs of rare dry gin and 100 mLs of old-fashioned lemonade in a high ball over ice. Then squeeze in 2 wedges of lemon, and then float 15 mils of bloody Shiraz gin on top. Can you see why it's called the Who Shot Tom Collins? You can find this recipe, more gin recipes, and all the cocktails of the week at alushlifemanual.com, where you'll also find all the ingredients in our shop. I'm actually one of the only people I know who loves January. I don't mind the dark and the gloom and the bad weather. After the excitement of the holidays cools down, somehow I feel I can get my best work done. Go figure. If you live for Lush Life, would you consider supporting us by buying us a coffee? Just go to buymeacoffee.com/lushlife and you can donate once or monthly to make sure we are still here every Tuesday. Theme music for Lush Life is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. And Lush Life is always and will be forever produced by Evo Terra and Simpler Media Productions. Which leaves me to say the wise words of Oscar Wilde, all things in moderation, including moderation, and always drink responsibly. Okay, the second part was mine. Next week, we are joined by the man known as Dr. Whiskey himself. Not only a PhD, but also a member of the Whiskey Band. Until that time, bottoms up.